Okay, this is ThinkTech Hawaii, and we're broadcasting on Ustream and Spreaker.com for both radio and video internet programming. And today is Asia in Review, and we have a long-distance connection with our old friend Ehsan Ahari, Dr. Ehsan Ahari, who is a strategic and security consultant in Alexandria, Virginia, writes a lot. You can see his writings all over the internet. And he was a professor of counterterrorism at APCSS, that's the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, for quite some time, which is how we got to know him. Ehsan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jay.
So you wrote a piece recently, and you sent me some other pieces about Egypt, and I think Egypt is a very important point now in the Middle East. What happens in Egypt will cast long shadows over the rest of that region. So we wanted to catch up with you on what's happening there and what your analysis is going forward. Last we saw it seemed to be in place, except that President Morsi was taking aggressive steps to enhance his own power, not unlike Erdogan in Turkey. And I think the Muslim Brotherhood was not that popular. And the liberal side of things began to get uncomfortable, and before you know it, there's a coup by the military deposing him. So where does that stand now? Is the coup complete? Is the coup reversible? What are people saying about it in Egypt and the rest of the world?
Well, as far as the Muslim Brotherhood is concerned, they're hoping that the coup is reversible. United States is negotiating actively between the military and civilian politicians, civilian groups, and what the United States wants, we are not saying it. We are saying that we want the return of democracy, but what we are not saying, or at least we are not calling for the return of Morsi, which is a clear signal to the military that their coup, even though we are not calling that, their coup is successful. So from the military's point of view, they would like to see the return of democracy at some point, maybe 6 to 9 months or even a year. In the meantime, they would like to see whether they can handpick some other, old cronies of Mubarak, or old cronies, from Mubarak's era at least. So at this point, only one thing is clear, Jay. The only thing that is clear to everybody who is watching Egypt is that the military is very much in command. Military has a huge start in the Egyptian economy. The Egyptian military is like the juggernaut of the Egyptian economy, and they want to maintain that control. Whether Egypt remains a democracy or not, they really don't care. And the irony is, as much as our rhetoric is about promoting democracy worldwide, we are kind of giving, in a wink and a nod, giving Sisi, the general who has ousted President Morsi, for the first time in the history of Egypt, a democratically elected president was ousted quite unceremoniously through a coup, even though we're not calling it, because we know President Obama knows the law that the moment we call it a coup, all the Egyptian aid will come to a halt. So we have a pretty bad and very unpredictable situation in Egypt. The supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood are not about to give up. They are continuing their sit-in, and I think as long as the U.S. representatives are negotiating in Egypt, the Egyptian army is not likely to take any harsh actions against the supporters of Morsi. But I won't bet my last dollar on it.
Yeah. Well, it's a world of contradictions, isn't it? I mean, a coup is not democracy, and when the military says they're going to restore democracy, you wonder how real, how genuine, how sincere that statement is. I mean, Egypt has had its fair share of military governments. I wonder though, why is Obama taking the position he's taking? He must have good and cogent reasons for doing this. Can you look over his shoulder and try to figure out what exactly is his reasoning?
You mean President Obama?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, President Obama knows that Egypt is a very important country for us, and Egypt is supporting at least two major objectives of the United States. One is the supply of oil, which passes through the Suez Canal, and Egypt is guaranteeing the continued opening of the canal. Secondly, Egypt is one of the two countries which has peace treaty with Israel. So one of the most significant objectives of the U.S. Government in the Middle East is to make sure that Israel remains secure. So as long as Egypt guarantees the Camp David Agreement with Egypt and Israel signed during the days of President Jimmy Carter in 78-79, as long as Egypt guarantees that, which Hosni Mubarak, the former dictator of Egypt, did, we are going to be very happy. Now, military is definitely a guarantor of that. Even though President Morsi, while he was in power only for 1 year, he did nothing to jeopardize that treaty. He knew that if he were to do something against that treaty, he's not going to last in power. So, from President Obama's perspective, in a way, I'm going to speak from both sides of my mouth. From the U.S. perspective, Egypt is a very important ally. So any instability in Egypt is going to be a very, very bad thing for the United States. But the downside of that is the United States knows that it can no longer control events in the Middle East at large or Egypt. But in Egypt, the United States has a definite advantage because we give $1.3 billion of military assistance to Egypt every year. And as long as we continue to give that assistance to Egypt or Egyptian military is going to be somewhat receptive to our notion of what should happen in Egypt. I am very much convinced, and unfortunately and sadly, I'm very much convinced that President Obama is not really interested in restoring democracy in Egypt, at least not for a short while.
Yeah.
And his main reason is that, Muslim Brotherhood is a big question mark for the United States, has been. And Islamic parties have been a big question mark. They were looked upon negatively by the United States all over the Middle East. And now, since Muslim Brotherhood came into power for 1 year, they did not do that well. But it's very easy to be critical of President Morsi because he did not do well. As you put it quite rightly, he behaved aggressively. But Jay, look at the history of Egypt. Democracy is a learned process. If I throw a person who doesn't know anything about swimming in a pool and expect him to at least survive, he might survive, but he might do all kinds of crazy things to survive. By that I mean, if you take a look at Morsi, if he were to be given 2-3 more years, and should have, lessen the pressure from all the other groups of the country, and that would have been a different story.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because he suffers a certain amount of criticism for this by the people who are the liberal people who would like to see democracy, who didn't like losing democracy. If Morsi was elected the leader, he should have remained a leader. We don't like coups to take down a properly elected leader. So they're not happy with Obama's position on this. And then in general, the Muslim Brotherhood and those who sympathize with it, they're not happy with this. I'm not sure that he really gained the kind of momentum that he was seeking. I guess if you don't like the Muslim Brotherhood and you are worried about what Morsi was going to do in the future, you're happy with what the president did. But I think a lot of people are unhappy with it. And you wonder, as you said, he's only got a few more years. These are the years of making legacy. These are the years of being a purist. If in fact he supports democracy, this is not exactly what he would have done. He's being a pragmatist without really supporting democracy. That's what I get out of it.
Oh yeah, he's not supporting democracy. He is supporting stability. He's looking at what's best for Israel, and to a certain extent, he's looking at what's best for us. Because look, since the Cold War years, we have been so much at home by supporting autocrats and dictators and tyrants in the Middle East. And we know how to deal with them because they know how to take orders from us, how to salute smartly, as the phrase goes, and implement what we want them to implement. Yemen is a classic example. President Hadi has pretty much given us a green light to go ahead and use as many drone attacks as possible to kill as many Al-Qaeda members, which is fine. But you take a look at the larger picture of Yemen, it's a basket case. It is slipping toward anarchy. You have shortage of water, you have shortage of oil, you have rotting pipelines, you have secession in the southern part, you have tension between Shias and Sunnis, and Yemen has a large number of Zaydi Shias. So you have when I look at the Middle East from our point of view, I'm not surprised that we don't have a policy because nothing seems to be working, especially in the aftermath of Arab awakening. When we have lost a whole bunch of autocrats, especially Mubarak, Zain al-Abidin bin Ali of Tunisia, we have no clue how to control. Now, the only way we know how to control is in Egypt is through using the tactic of our the tool of our military assistance, and then try to negotiate. And right now, a couple of senators are still, I think, in Egypt. They were there until yesterday. And they were making all kinds of statements. Of course, Senator McCain is calling it a coup, much to the chagrin or embarrassment of President Obama, because the United States has not taken a position that it is a coup. Totally, embarrassing, for the whole world to see the United States is calling a coup something else. And just hoping that by not calling coup, it'll just go away.
Yeah. Well, you sent me this article, and you today, and you said it was a long article, and indeed, I haven't finished reading it. It was so long. It was quite long, and it was for the notion, as you mentioned earlier, that the U.S. has a strange foreign policy because we support leaders who are tyrannical, and we kind of muck it up a little by taking the wrong side of the issue sometimes. And we've done that for generations in the Middle East, and we are paying a price for having done that. So I guess the big issue that I would ask you about is exactly what did that article say, and what is the usefulness of that analysis in examining U.S. policy right now? Does it mean that we have the kind of baggage that we can never escape from? Does it mean that our foreign policy in the Middle East is not successful, that it's turning out to be a failure because of that baggage? What does it mean to you?
Well, it's not just the baggage because it is continuation of the same policy. The baggage is that we have been supporting the tyrants, and we have been totally ignoring the plight of the people, while publicly we are paying lip service to the notion of democracy and human rights and equal treatment and so on and so forth. But in practice, we haven't been doing that. Our ideal would be in Egypt would be to see military rule or some semblance of military rule, but President Obama will never say that. No U.S. official will say that publicly, and especially even if I were to be working at the APCSS, I would not have said that. I'm saying this. I'm calling it as fast as I see it, simply because I'm a private individual. So the United States is living in a kind of a Janus phase world. We are implementing a Janus phase policy. The public face of our policy in the Middle East is that yes, we support democracy. Of course, we support democracy. Of course, we support human rights. Of course, we support equality of a person under law and constitutionalism and so on and so forth. But the private part of the real part of the policy is that of course we support the tyrants. Of course, we support those who are going to salute smartly and take orders from us. Of course, we support those who are going to be providing the flow of oil through the Suez Canal. So that's the reality. Now, where are we going to go from here? I have a big problem with that policy. I think we might be in for some major surprises, unfortunately, because I think a great deal of the United States and its legacy of the support of democracy, especially the Wilsonian legacy of the United States. But President Obama's real and pragmatic world, I think stability becomes the first and the last kind of objective that he's pursuing. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. I think Egypt is in for. Well, that's why I call one of my email notes. I got a simmering crisis in Egypt. The crisis is simmering, and I hope it doesn't explode very badly for us.
Yeah, I think if the more you look around, the more you wonder how much our excursion into Iraq, undermines stability in the long term, and we're only seeing the ripple effects of that now. At the time, George Bush thought it was a good idea, and people warned him that when you tamper that way he was tampering in Iraq, then you have secondary ripple effects all over the region. And I would suggest to you that those ripple effects are still happening, and it's a sort of a measure of instability. He sort of stirred the pot, and we're still suffering from that.
I'm glad you mentioned Iraq. Iraq is a case, is a state that is heading toward a crisis. You know, the Shia-Sunni divide has become extremely harsh. Al-Qaeda is becoming extremely powerful. They are assassinating and murdering people left and right. Every single day you wake up, you hear that 50 people died or 100 people died. They're killing people in mosques. You know, I mean, come on. If somebody else were to do that, the entire world of Islam would be up in arms. In Iran, they're killing each other in the name of sectarian divide. And that sectarian divide is becoming extremely powerful as a source of conflict in Iraq, and of course in next door to Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. So you have all kinds of things that are bubbling, and I don't envy President Obama's position, but I still would like to see some semblance of a strategy that is going to promote America's values as well as its interests. I think President Obama's foreign policy in the Middle East is primarily promoting America's interests at the expense of its values. That is the sad part.
Well, what about Israel? You know, I mean, all these things are connected, aren't they? And part of his policy, at least part of his policy, is in defense of Israel. And Israel, for the United States, is the dominant, country in that region, or at least of dominant interest.
Yes, it is.
And it would certainly be a factor in his determination of foreign policy in that area, and it is a determination of foreign policy of all the countries in that area as well. So, how important is Israel in what's going on in Egypt right now?
Well, from Israeli point of view, what's happening in Egypt, if the military stays in power, Israel will be hunky-dory. Will be happy. Because all Israel wants is to see a stable Egypt, Islamists under control, and the government of Egypt continue to honor the Camp David agreement. Israel could care less, as much as we don't care less in reality, even though we say we do. Israel care as little about the welfare and the long-term well-being of Egyptian masses as the United States. Unfortunately, that's a fact. So. Israeli perspective is that yes, military should be in power because Israel has. You see, Israel is being very smart. It's playing a low-key role, but it has been whispering in the ears of the United States about do this and do this and do this, that kind of stuff. But only in the case of Iran, Israel has gone ahead of the United States. It has taken the first seat in terms of putting pressure on President Obama through Congress. But in the case of Egypt, Israel is being very smart. And of course, Israel is happy with what we're doing. Israel is happy that we are not demanding. We could demand the return of Morsi tomorrow, and I have very serious doubt whether the Egyptian army is going to blow us off. Yeah. Because they know the clinking of dollars. They know what $1.3 billion mean because of course.
It has to have an effect on what goes on. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I was we haven't talked, but I was in Turkey in I guess it was late May, early June. I was there in Istanbul when the riots started. And I had a chance to see pretty close what was going on and what Erdogan was doing in order to promote, in order to, create all this tumult. And I wonder, that is a sort of an example of democracy, if you will, but it's also an example of instability. It is also the clash, perhaps, between the old generation and the new generation, between the Muslim world and the European world. Maybe you could even say it's clash of civilization. And it has, don't you think, it has an effect. It casts a long shadow. After all, Erdogan was traveling all over the Arab world trying to act as a facilitator, a leader, a peacemaker, or whatever he was trying to do, and trying to be, trying to make Turkey into an important diplomatic, member of the community there. I think he shot himself in the foot by his actions during the riots. But I'm wondering your thoughts about whether there's a connection between the apparent instability in Turkey and the instability in Egypt.
No, I don't think there's a connection. I think every other point that you mentioned about Erdogan, I totally agree with you. Erdogan, he has been doing very well economically speaking. He has been doing very well in terms of conducting a foreign policy of zero problem with his neighbors. But I think he got a little carried away with, in terms of his ties with Syria. He should have let the United States take the lead in that because, and as things turn out, since Russia, Iran, and China less, and Russia and Iran are so vehemently supporting Bashar al-Assad of Damascus, he is still in power. Erdogan quite wrongly concluded that Syria, Bashar al-Assad will be ousted within like a matter of weeks. So that's where he has one of the problems. But Erdogan's main problem is, even though he has been prime minister of Turkey for almost 10 years or so, he never really learned the art of democracy. In democracy, people don't accept you as some kind of a grandfatherly image, that nobody's going to question you. He does not believe in free exchanges. He does not believe in protests. He got protesters all kinds of names. He doesn't want to deal with them. He doesn't want to negotiate with them. I think success in Erdogan's good performance in the economy and so on and so forth has gone to his head. He has forgotten that he's after all a leader of a Turkish democracy. He never learned how the democracy operates, and that's where the problem is.
Democracy. I made a note to ask you about that. I mean, the people use the term democracy, in my view, pretty loosely these days. If you are talking about the people and you're talking about respecting the wishes that some of them, maybe many of them, express in the streets with their signs and demonstrations and what have you, I'm not sure that's really democracy so much sometimes as chaos. And I wonder, your thoughts, because you've seen democracy per se, or democracy as a term, pop up in all these countries which have a certain amount of instability. And it's a loose word.
Richard Newstad, a very famous political scientist at Harvard, he was talking about the U.S. presidents, and he said the most powerful tool the president of the United States has is the power to persuade people. Power to persuade is a sense of democracy, aside from participation and so on and so forth. You are absolutely right. Participation just does not mean democracy. It means a lot more. So where Erdogan failed, in my opinion, is the fact that he did not believe in how to negotiate with people. If people protest, then they have the right to protest. If they disagree with any of his policies, they have a right to do that. Erdogan's style in general, I've been talking to him, and I've been to Turkey, of course, not as recently as you did, but I've been there, and I've been speaking. I went there as a guest of their counterterrorism center, and I stayed at the military headquarters. I spoke to dozens and dozens of military officers. I had a feeling that democracy is quite secure in Turkey. And I think now, between 2005 when I was there, now I think democracy is even more secure in the sense that civilian supremacy is pretty much institutionalized in Turkey. I said pretty much, but it's not irreversible yet, 100% irreversible yet, in my opinion. But that's the problem in Egypt is that it has never been accepted that military dominance is a sine qua non of Egyptian politics. So I'm not worried about the future of democracy in Turkey as much as I am worried about Egypt and the very stability of Egypt.
It seems to me, though, that if you take a country that hasn't had a very democratic, history, and you impose what you think is, quote, democracy on it, when no one has any experience or training in how to conduct themselves in a democracy, so to speak, then you don't have the same thing as what you have in the United States or in Britain or in Western Europe and all that. It's not really a democracy. It may be something else, but it's not. It's a different definition, is what I'm saying. And
Well, that is the closest we can come to a system of government where people have had a say. Of course, in the United States, not to digress too much, but in the United States, the basic foundation is what Walter Lippmann calls manufactured consensus. Manufactured consensus is that the ruling elite make sure that the needs of the people, middle class, lower class, is fulfilled, so that they do not revolt against them. So that is kind of a managed democracy. So all over the world, including the United States, we have a managed democracy, but that's not the operative word. Operative word is democracy. The government is managed. It's management of conflict. And the greatest problem with Turkey recently that you referred to is the inability of Erdogan to manage conflict. And the greatest failure that's experienced by Egypt right now is the collapse of democracy and refusal of military to. Military is the Praetorian Guard. It has never been a powerful professional fighting force like Israel or like a Western military. Militaries all over the Arab world are Praetorian Guards. They guard the ruling class and ruling elites, and of course in the process they guard their own economic interests. So as long as that system is going to remain intact, there is no future for democracy. There is no at least bright future for democracy in Egypt. And you can say the same thing about Pakistan.
Yeah. Well, moving to one other issue I wanted to ask you about, and I heard on National Public Radio this morning a story about Yemen, and indeed Yemen has had a fair share of drone violence lately. A number of people have been killed, and the drones apparently just fly overhead, and when the U.S. decides that it's appropriate to take out one of the Taliban or the Al Qaeda, whatever it is, then they're able to kill them, and that's remarkable technology. It's also remarkable on the rules of engagement side, because apparently the Yemen government doesn't mind that we do that, although the people, according to this story, are not particularly happy with it. I mean, this is sort of a free-for-all here. What's happening is Al Qaeda is operating in Yemen really ubiquitously, and the U.S. is responding to that with the help of the Yemen government, maybe because we offer them aid, by just shooting them where they stand, to the extent we know where they are. But we don't really have an on-the-ground strategy. It's only these drones in the air, and you really wonder if this is a sustainable way to deal, with the terrorists.
Well, a sustainable way it is not. But President Obama doesn't have much of a choice. I think he's doing the best he can out of a very messy situation. Yemen is a total failed state. Yemen is heading toward a crisis, toward anarchy. AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is very powerful there. So what Obama is doing is, through drone attacks, he's targeting high-valued targets. But the downside of that is, in the process, he's killing a lot of civilians. As a result of that, Yemen is the number of terrorists in Yemen, what we call terrorists or what they call freedom fighters, is growing, by leaps and bounds. So Obama doesn't have much of a choice. Now, the Yemeni government is highly corrupt and extremely vulnerable and highly dependent upon the U.S. support. So President Hadi of Yemen has given the United States a green light. Okay, do whatever you want to do. But I think what he's doing is just buying time to stay in power. I see a big collapse in Yemen. I think we cannot avert the collapse. Even though Saudi Arabia is next door, Saudi Arabia is going to probably send forces at some point if the anarchy were to worsen. But in the meantime, the United States is hoping that through drone attacks will keep the number of Al-Qaeda leaders at a lower level. But I have my very strong notion that we're not going to succeed in that. And I think the drone policy will continue, because that's the only tactic we have. We have no strategy for Egypt. We have no strategy for Yemen. We have no strategy for Pakistan. So we are working with only one. We have become a one-trick pony. Obama administration has become a one-trick pony. Use drone wars, as Scahill calls it, dirty wars, to eradicate the terrorists. But eradication of terrorism, terrorism were to become a successful policy, terrorism would have been long gone from our lexicon, from our memory. What we need is a comprehensive strategy, which the United States is certainly not in a position to prepare or produce or to inject successfully, because it requires enormous amount of economic investment, which we don't have.
That's the big question. That's the big question, is exactly what do? We have these notions of smart power and soft power, and all these ways to ostensibly reach the people in the polity, reach the people who will ultimately recreate the government in a truer democracy. But for example, the story about Yemen, it's an interesting point, is that when the drones fly over and they kill these operatives for Al Qaeda, there's usually some kind of collateral damage and civilians get killed.
Yes.
And what happens is, I find this very interesting, is what happens is the U.S. neither apologizes nor takes any action to assuage that. What happens is Al Qaeda steps in and they pay for the funerals and the burial expenses and whatever family allowance for the families of the people who were killed in the collateral damage. They make it into an opportunity. They make friends that way. We stay, a century, rather a continent away, operating from a bunker, and we don't make friends. And over time, I think that's very corrosive when you have the collateral damage and then Al Qaeda taking an opportunistic view of it. We have to get on the ground.
You say over time, but I think the time is right now. The corrosiveness of that policy is showing. Look what happened. We have to close our embassy, even though we're not calling it the closure of the embassy. See, we're living in euphemism in foreign policy. There's no coup in Egypt. There's no closure of the U.S. embassy in Yemen and other countries. No, it's becoming corrosive. I think President Obama, I am critical of him, but I'm also sympathetic for his perspective, because he doesn't have a winning hand. But implementation of anti-terrorism strategy, which is very comprehensive, cannot be done given our economic, the economic problems that we're facing. The enormous billions of dollars that we are wasting in Afghanistan, and still we have no guarantee of winning in Afghanistan. So in the wake of all these, we don't have the kind of dollar reserve of Cold War years to keep on continuing, keep on spending and remaining on top. That's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people claim that we are a declining power.
Well, step by step, Ehsan. I mean, if I made you the president just for today, I know you'd have some ideas about how to handle this, but step by step, there must be some kind of strategical approach that would be more effective. And maybe it takes a little time, but what would you do to get people on the ground, to affect the thinking of the people in these countries, to take the the enormous, what I consider a fragmentation right now in the Middle East, and put it into some sense of order, and in the process make Al Qaeda less desirable for the people, take away their stranglehold that they have on so many people? What would you do?
Well, you're asking me a very brilliant but extremely complex question. I would say that I would develop a country-by-country strategy at a low-key level, not at a modest level. First of all, for Egypt, I would definitely I endorse what President Obama is doing in terms of sending his diplomats to see whether some kind of a negotiated solution would emerge that would at least postpone the crisis in Egypt. For Yemen, it's like a big sinkhole. But still, I think the use of smart power, soft power, economic power has to be used. But Jay, Yemen has a rotten government. Mm-hmm. That government has to go. One corrupt dictator has been replaced by another corrupt dictator. So people are still mad. People are still simmering with anger. They're saying, who the heck has brought this guy? So the answer is the United States has brought this guy to power. So we become the brunt of all kinds of hatred and focus on all kinds of hatred and anger and so on and so forth. So I think we will develop country by country approach and go from there, and perhaps develop some sort of a rapprochement, not an understanding, not a rapprochement with our European allies, and see how much economic assistance they can provide. But it has to be, strategies at the lower level, and then go from there. We have a Saudi bank, the dollar, tons of dollars to back us up, but not wasting those dollars, but to use them sensibly. Right now, Saudi Arabia is supporting the military, is fanatically opposed to Muslim Brotherhood, because ideologically Muslim Brotherhood hates the Saudis and vice versa. So Saudis are, of course, they are on our side, but they are again pushing the same wrong cause of supporting the military and pushing Egypt to a crisis.
Seems like you have to be smart on both ends of it. You have to be smart in your global public statements, such as what position you take vis-a-vis Morsi and the coup in Egypt. But you also have to be smart to get the hearts and minds of the individuals who live in these countries somehow. I'm reminded of the comparison, if you will, between the way Israel operates in other countries in the Middle East. They have people on the ground. Whatever the characterization of those people are actually there. They speak the languages of these other countries. They're embedded in the society. We don't have that. I remember when we first started our engagement in Afghanistan, we didn't have anybody who spoke Farsi over there.
Pashto Farsi.
And we didn't have anybody who spoke the language in Iraq either. So we couldn't really develop a good intelligence system without having anyone on the ground. We couldn't really engage with the people and trust relationships without having somebody who really knew the culture. Now you can say that the Army second lieutenants developed a better approach to this through some training in the Army bases, but to me that's not enough. Don't you think we have to do like the Israelis do, that we have to get out there on the ground, we have to talk to the people, we have to, be part of their society, close to every man, woman, and child, rather than, treat them from a bunker in Colorado.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but the thing is, we have all the smarts, we have all the knowledge, we have all the means of doing it, but our policies are alienating the hell out of those people, and they Americans cannot walk the streets of any country, any Muslim country that I know, maybe Indonesia, maybe or Turkey. That's it. Beyond that, the contact between Americans and kind of ordinary people is very, very difficult. I'm talking about American officials. So that becomes a big problem for us to use soft power, smart power smartly. And we have all kinds of intelligence, but you're right. Human intelligence, we're lacking. Even Great Britain, even though it has stopped being a world-class power many decades ago, but I think Great Britain and the intelligence service of Great Britain has a better understanding of the world of Islam in general, and Arab world in particular, or African world in particular, than unfortunately the United States. I think our excessive reliance on the military and military tool of power has become our worst enemy. It keeps in the way of developing other tools of power, including soft power that you talked about. Public diplomacy was an important part of General Petraeus' counter insurgency strategy, but that strategy is pretty much out of the window. Now even in Afghanistan. So we are facing a pretty grim situation.
Well, on that point, Ehsan, I'd like to ask you. We have only a couple of minutes left of broadcast time, and I'd like to ask you for regardless of your wishes, regardless of what your advice, regardless of your strategies that you would recommend to the government and government structures on this, what do you think is actually going to happen here? I'll give you a horizon of 3 years. What's the Middle East going to look like in 3 years?
The Middle East is going to have as I see it, most definitely, Islamic parties are going to be more visible, as opposed to less visible. countries like Egypt is going to be a big question mark. Egypt is going to determine it because Egypt has been the largest Arab state. Egypt has been the religious and cultural center of Egypt. So Egypt is very, very important. I think Egypt the turbulence in Egypt makes me really wonder what's going to happen in Middle East. I'm very pessimistic. Saudi Arabia is going to be a question mark. Watch Saudi Arabia closely. Watch Jordan closely. It's going to be a big question mark because Islamists are going to create a lot of problems. Syria is definitely going to be a very big question mark, and I think in Syria, two countries that are fighting like hell to keep Bashar Assad in power are Russia and Iran. Iran has enormous stakes. If Bashar Assad goes, Iran will have no influence in Syria or Lebanon. Hezbollah, Iran, the party that Iran personally created as a country, that party will be gone. So.
Well, I think I have my answer.
I'm not very hopeful.
I think I have my answer. It's going to be continuing fragmentation and risk to the United States, and we have to redouble our efforts.
Anti-Americanism and more violence. I think you're talking about civilizational war. No, it's intra-civilizational war. It's going to be sectarian war. Is going to be in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq. And the Gulf monarchies are going to be lining up or trying to gang up on Iran and trying to persuade the United States to take military action. But God forbid if we take any military action in Iran.
Ehsan, we're running out of time, so let me thank you for coming on again. That's Ehsan Ahari, looking into the crystal ball in Egypt. Ehsan is a strategic and security consultant in Alexandria, Virginia. He's a former professor of counterterrorism at APEC, the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, APCSS. And it'll be interesting to know, Ehsan, that we have here in the studio, going to follow a show just in a couple of minutes. We have James and Lauren Moriarty, who are going to talk. I don't know what they're going to talk about, but they can comment on the same subject in Egypt. Thank you so much, Ehsan.
Please give them my best. They're wonderful people. You have a wonderful guest.
I will. Thank you so much, Ehsan Ahari. Aloha. We'll talk again.
Aloha to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.